Well, welcome everyone. I'm Marissa Wagner. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Buildxact. We are a leading construction estimating and job management platform and community for residential builders, remodelers, trades, who are all looking for a better way to build. So we're really excited that you could join us today for this important conversation about how the residential construction market is shifting, what builders, what remodelers can do right now to stay competitive, and more importantly, future ready, because we live in a very fast-paced environment right now. So we're thrilled to be joined today by Grant Farnsworth. Grant is the president of the Farnsworth Group, one of the most respected names in building product research. Grant brings nearly 2 decades of experience uncovering the data behind how pros and how homeowners make decisions in the residential construction market. So through his work with manufacturers, with dealers, with industry associations, Grant is doing the work that helps connect the dots between what the market wants and how businesses can adapt. So he's here today to share some key insights with you on how the market's shifting, what that means for your business and your business strategy going forward. So welcome, Grant. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you, Marissa. Thanks for having us as always. Always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so let's talk about the chaotic environment
Sure.
that our customers, that builders live in. Um, with rising material costs, tighter margins, even more intricacies coming into the labor and trade shortages, and evolving homeowner expectations. Today's builders they're really under more pressure than ever, to
Yes.
do more with less and to do it faster.
Yep.
There's things that we're doing here at Buildxact to kind of meet and respond to those very fast-moving needs of our customers.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested from all the research that your team conducts. What is the biggest signal that's telling you that the market is evolving faster than ever?
I think for us, for those who aren't familiar with our firm, we're a custom research firm and consulting firm that focuses exclusively on the building products and home improvement space. And we've been in business now for almost 40 years. And typically we'll see, these purchase behavior trends last for a few years at a time, right? We may be in a um, growth oriented mode. And so people are really looking for high quality. We may be in a softer market and it's all about price, but those trends would last, 5, 6, 7 years until we kind of shift modes and slowly turn that ship around. What's been happening over the last few years has just been rapid pace. We've been in availability mode, and then it's pricing mode, and then it's high demand and high quality mode, and ups and downs, just faster than we've historically seen in this industry for the 40 years that we've been studying it. So I think, Marissa, as we're looking at what is the trend, I think the trend is the fact that it's changing so quickly, and the speed with which brands, builders, contractors need to adapt and pay attention to what's going on in the mindset of the homeowner is critical, right? Because your talk track 2 years ago, 3 years ago should definitely be a different talk track than what you've got going on today. And I promise you, probably 18 months from now, it's going to be even different. So, that's what we're noticing. A pretty big outlier over the last few decades.
Yeah, and I'm interested to dive a bit further because I know for sure we hear this a lot from before they become our customers, we hear from builders a lot around how important it is to manage that relationship with their clients.
Yeah.
So if you could speak a bit more to what you're seeing in that adaptation of old processes that builders used to use on how they communicate and that several builders are still using.
Yeah.
Um, and then, what are those more successful builders doing and how they're evolving their client communications,
Yeah.
that you're seeing are really working in helping them scale and grow their
Yeah.
business?
Well, I'll touch on a few things. I came prepared, Marissa, so we can jump around wherever we need to. But we look at a lot of supply demand stuff. We've been paying more and more attention to what's going on between the ears of the consumer, the homeowner, because that seems to be a little bit more directional on where we're heading than perhaps some of the metrics that we've historically relied on. So I'll skip forward through some of this supply demand stuff and get into the consumer mindset so that we can really help builders and contractors understand what's going on with the psyche of the homeowner that's leading them towards certain decisions or not. And so when we do our research, we've got a lot of public things that we can share. This is what's been happening in the mind of the consumer just over the last couple of years on the consumer confidence front. So this is from a conference board. It's a one of many measures that takes a regular monthly consumer pulse across the country. University of Michigan does a great one as well. But the conference board has a few metrics that we look at. You can see them represented here, which is the present situation. How are you feeling about your world today? How are you, what's your overall confidence? And then maybe how are you feeling about your world tomorrow, right? And so when we look at what's been happening this year alone, we've really fallen off the cliff for the first 4 months of the year as far as consumer confidence because of everything on the right-hand side of this screen. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek. There's so many darn things listed there. It's kind of hysterical. But at the same turn, it's also very frightening, right? So this degree of tariffs are on, tariffs are off. It's 150%, it's 10%, it's 50%. We don't the delays and the pauses and now it's back on, now it's back off. This level of uncertainty had a direct impact on that first 4 months of the customer sentiment across this country. So for many of us, this idea of uncertainty almost turning into pessimism was reality. And builders need to acknowledge this, contractors need to acknowledge this because it changes what the homeowner is going to be doing when they're investing in their home, how they're evaluating a contractor, how they're choosing contractors. It puts emphasis on, where there are concerns versus where they may be loosening the purse strings. And I can tell you for the first 4 months, there was a lot of concern that the homeowners are going to be retracting from this spend. Fortunately, in May, we did see a bounce back up, Marissa, not to the degree that we want, but at least stop the bleeding, hopefully for a longer term, but at least temporarily. So that's kind of context of where we're coming into this year, Marissa. I think we are all a little bit more optimistic that by this time, consumers will be feeling confident because we were growing in confidence coming out of the election in October, November, December. We were growing, we were doing great. Things are looking good for 2025, and then all that happened. So I think this speaks to what a lot of builders and a lot of contractors are being challenged with right now. We work with the Home Improvement Research Institute as well, and every quarter we talk to thousands of homeowners and ask, hey, just overall, what are your biggest concerns? And in the list that we provide them, you can see that, budget related, money related stuff is at the top. That softens maybe a little bit as you start getting into the higher household incomes. So as we get into the 150, 160, 200K plus earners in this country, their sensitivity to finances isn't as great as the middle and lower incomes. So I think if you're a contractor, if you're a builder, really dissect your audience to understand where they may fall and what's important to them, because there are some nuances when you think about demographics and the customers you serve. But collectively, very financially sensitive, and in many, many cases, budget motivated. So I'm telling you, if you're a builder and that customer isn't bringing up budget, I mean, if you're serving the uber luxury, that's an outlier. They're kind of insulated. But outside of those luxury builders, if that would-be buyer isn't bringing up budget to you, I'd be willing to bet it's somewhere going on in their mind. It's a real big driver right now. Same thing with just is it a good time to buy a home? And it just doesn't feel like a good time to buy a home. It doesn't feel like a good time to build a home. It doesn't feel like a good time to make those significant changes. And I think there's a lot of factors playing into that beyond the uncertainty of the market and my financial concerns. There are a lot of lock-in effects here when we look at some of the demand, supply and demand fundamentals that can back up into. But there's a lot of reasons that people are staying put in their home because they've got a 3% mortgage. Home prices continue to increase. Inventory levels are lower than we'd like to see. So all of these things are really putting pressures on homeowners to make a very conscious decision of, do I want to move? Do I want to stay put? And do I want to invest in that home or go buy a new home? Because I'm really, really concerned about what's going to be happening in the months ahead. So a little bit of context, certainly on the consumer side of things. We do see a little bit more positive reaction to those smaller projects for pros. Iffiness on hiring a contractor. And when we ask, well, why might you not hire a pro? There's the perception, certainly from the consumers, that they're expensive, they're hard to find, right? They're delayed in getting the projects done. So we as a contractor community have a lot of challenges to overcome in instilling confidence in the homeowner that we're going to show up, we're going to be on budget, we're going to be on time, right? We've really got to burn a lot of calories these days just bringing that homeowner confidence in that decision to do some home projects, to build that home, and to use professionals to do it. So there's definitely some headwinds that we see, Marissa, but a lot of strong undercurrents in the fundamentals when it comes to the future and the growth opportunities for our industry.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Grant. We hear that a lot from our builder customers is, in managing the relationship with their clients, a lot of time it's overcoming decades worth of expectations, specifically to the points that you're talking about. It's going to be too expensive. And there's a lot of chatter going on around, things that do make home building or renovating more expensive right now that are out of the builder's hands as far as, fluctuating material costs or, material availability, labor availability, et cetera. Um, and that's where we look to solve problems, right? Well, how can you make sure that, the price of the material that you quoted hasn't fluctuated significantly by the time you actually order that material? How
Yep.
do you make sure that, you can communicate with your clients in real time so they don't have any surprises whenever it comes time to pay that final bill?
That's right.
So I'm interested because, you had initially talked about wanting to start off with supply and demand.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to pivot there,
Sure.
specifically around um, labor
Yep.
is a major headache for the home building industry right now. So I'm interested what you're seeing in your research,
Yeah.
specifically around some macroeconomic, trade shortage was a thing before we started to see this major volatility over the past couple of months, and it hasn't improved.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
interested to see what your research says about how are home builders, dealing in real time with labor shortages. And then
Sure.
I can speak to some of the things that we're seeing our builders do that are helping them as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a challenge that we've been talking a lot about for the past, I would say, 12 to 18 months. I'm trying to get it on back on the radar. It's not, you're right, it's not a new topic, right? We've been talking about labor challenges for the past 10, 20 years. So I think as an industry, and I think there's probably a lot of, builders and contractors listening in that have just found ways to deal with it, right? It's just kind of a known pain in the rear end for this industry. So I think we've almost kind of normalized the challenges of labor, but it is one of those big constraints. So we think about labor, land, lumber, and now we've got logistics and legislation, kind of these five L's. And you would argue that all five are headwinds, but this labor piece for home builders is a big one. And we look at labor participation. This is only going back as of May for 10 years. We've certainly rebounded since COVID, but as you go back kind of post World War II, the percentage of able-bodied adults working in this country has continued to slowly decline. So, I mean, this is kind of a warm body issue because of how we build homes and do these projects. Moreover, we also look at the unemployment number and job openings in our industry. And so this blue line is the unemployment rate for our industry. It is seasonal. So we have, cold climate, parts of our country that if you're a window contractor, roofing, exterior trade, you may be laid off or furloughed for, 3 or 4 months until the weather warms, then you're hired back on. But what's interesting is when you see that blue line, that industry unemployment rate drop below the national employment, it further shows that need that we have in the building trades. The red line at the top are the job openings. And again, outside of the last, call it 9 or so months, maybe 12 months, for the last 10 years, we've been on this pretty good run up of job openings increasing month over month, year over year type of thing. So, we've shown this kind of, decade long trend of we've got more jobs than we have people to fill it. So big concerns on the labor front. Moreover, when it comes to our current market, we're a little bit soft. Housing starts are lower than we anticipated this year. Those larger project volumes are softer than we anticipated so far this year. And so knowing that we've got a soft market and we're still facing some of these job opening concerns, labor concerns, what happens when the market returns at 5% gain, 7%, 12% increase? Who's going to be doing that work? And so I think when we talk a lot about labor, it is a warm body, long-term challenge. It's not going to be solved overnight by all of a sudden, oh, great, there's a million people that want to be in the trades and they're all skilled. Wouldn't that be lovely? That's just not how it's going to work. So a lot of this is falling on manufacturers, it's falling on suppliers, and it's falling on organizations like Buildxact. We are hearing more and more builders looking to technology and looking to partners to help them gain efficiencies wherever the heck they can gain, right? And this labor piece is one of them. So if you can help save me a few hours by not having to drive all the way to my supplier to check on availability and have them do a takeoff, by not having to, sit on the phone for half an hour and get up-to-date pricing, because we've already seen so far this year a lot of manufacturers release price increases. Okay.
Yeah.
How can you help me keep up to speed, be more efficient with my time, knowing that this labor challenge is probably only going to get worse if I've got a good business and start experiencing some growth by the end of this year and into 2026, 2027.
Yeah, and then that's really well said, Grant. There are the things that you can control and the things that you can't control. And certain items like increasing the labor force and the trade force within specialty trades is something that's very long tail. So it's more about finding efficiencies where you can in your business operations, with the labor that you do have. And much like communication or improved communication with your actual client and homeowner can help you really solve a lot of headaches on the actual build and development. The one thing that I love about our software is our scheduling tool and how that really helps with, builders and their, subcontractors, their vendors, et cetera, because they're able to communicate in real time any scheduling delays. Because they also have unknowns and uncontrollables that happen within their building process, whether it's, to your point earlier, a weather delay, or if it's, oh, this subcontractor double booked this job and we actually can't have them on site this day. Being able to communicate how that is impacting every other single subcontractor or vendor that builder is dealing with one small schedule change that automates everything else just saves hours for that builder, right? So it's more about those smaller intricacies and looking at it from a different way instead of, okay, well, okay, the simple solution would be like, okay, well, I'll get more laborers, I'll find better subcontractors, but we know that is definitely not that simple, right? So it's finding a different approach and way to deal with it, as you were speaking to, for sure.
Well, and there's a customer experience component of that as well. So if you're the builder and you've got full transparency and you're up to speed on all of your timetables and schedules, et cetera, to be able to communicate that to the homeowner so the homeowner is clued in on what's going on. We see that as a constant pain point for homeowners as well. If they're canceling projects or having frustrations with their pros, one of those elements is timelines and scheduling. And we've heard this historically. I mean, in the qualitative work that we do for our clients, where we're interviewing homeowners and pros, there's this inherent conflict in communication,
Yes.
right? So if we've got tools that help enable us to remove some of those barriers, that's just a much better experience for that homeowner. That project's going to go a lot smoother for everybody because we know that both sides have these pain points with one another, and so often it comes back to communication.
Yeah, 100%. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier around housing starts,
Yep.
and that they're lower than anticipated this year. And so, what that means, what we hear a lot from our builders is the importance behind being able to quote or bid a job very quickly and, making sure that it's, accurate, or that their client is getting a good look at, this is somewhat within the ballpark of where we're actually going to be at on costing this job whenever we actually win it, right? So I'm interested in what you're seeing research wise in, that ability to quickly pivot and win work whenever the demand is not as high,
Yeah.
like in today's current kind of climate.
Yeah, it becomes critical, right? So, I mean, every housing start you can get, um, is a critical one. Most of us, most of the builders that are probably on this call aren't, the top 25. They're not building 10,000 homes a year. The average home builder establishment is building 6 homes a year. There are thousands of home builder establishments. The majority of them are not doing 200 plus homes, right? So every build is an important build. And so you do need to be able to respond quickly, particularly in soft markets where you have lower lead volumes. And we are seeing that we have a quarterly survey that we send out to a wide range of contractors. And we are seeing lead volumes decline. So, the opportunities that we have to win business are lower now than they were a year ago. So we've got to make it count. And at the same time, the competition is increasing, right? So, that would be home buyer or homeowner that's looking for a project is now subbing this thing out or getting quotes from multiple contractors, multiple builders, not just one. A few years ago, it was whoever shows up gets the project, and I don't care what you're charging me. That's a different story today. I already talked about some of the challenges that homeowners are facing with budgets. And so they're going to be looking to two or three builders to see who's really coming in on budget and how are they doing this stuff. So, as we're looking at, housing starts, we've seen decent permit activity over the last couple of years of builders, getting ready, being able to, but it's that idea on, closing that project. There are some new home builders that are trying to clear out some inventory. We've got, over 8 months of inventory of new homes. So now we're fighting, buyers on, well, do I just go buy one that's already built? Do I go ahead and build one myself? I'm making discrete choices because there's a lot of budget sensitivity going on. And so I think you have to be aware of the choices that homeowners have or home buyers have. I think you have to be aware of the inventory levels that are out there for new homes and the options that they have, the budget sensitivities. And again, yeah, the quicker you can respond to it to leverage those opportunities are going to be critical because right now we're just not seeing as many start opportunities as we were last year.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just add another hat to these small builders, right? They're building, they're running a business. Now they have to be advisors on, okay, well, what type of build or opportunity should this home buyer
Tell you
take?
what, yeah,
It's definitely one of those industries and one of those jobs that if you are a small, medium, business that runs residential construction, you wear several different hats.
absolutely.
Um,
Counselor needs to be one of those hats. Like right
yeah,
now, like
sometimes counseling yourself, right?
100%. Yes.
Yeah,
However
like
you need to do it, like great, knock yourself out. But this idea of bringing comfort and confidence, like there is a nervous buyer out there right now.
yeah,
The intent is strong, right, Marissa? So we look at intent metrics as well of, do you want to do something in your home? Do you want to spend more on your home? Do you want to do things that are related to your home and your space? And the home improvement kind of market, at least, is second only to, groceries as far as homeowners that we survey saying, yeah, I'm going to spend more this year than I did last. Groceries is number one, home is number two, and then below that are hobbies and travel and entertainment and. So folks want to spend and invest in their home, but they are so uncertain if today's the day to write that check
yeah,
that you as a pro, you have to instill confidence in them. Tell them why it's better to do it now than to wait. Provide those reassurances that here's the benefits you're going to get from these type of cabinets. Here's the benefits you're going to get from this type of shingle. Let me tell you the benefits in upgrading here. Let me tell you the benefits of trading down there. How can you counsel them really to instill confidence? Because they want it. I'm telling
yeah,
you, they want it. And in a lot of cases, they've got equity to do some big projects if it's an existing home project. Um, they're just so uncertain and nervous
mm,
about what's kind of ahead that they need somebody to just, it's all good. This is a great time to do it.
yeah. And for that builder to have that confidence, they really need to have the insight into what's going on in every portion of that build, that remodel, that extension, whatever that project may be, to confidently give that information to their client. And so, you know, this is the reason why, we really took a core focus on the estimating portion of the whole process of, home building is if you don't have your numbers right from the beginning, or you don't have the confidence that that's almost like your first impression
That's
with
right.
a home buyer, right? Is that quote. And it's how they know how well you're going to be communicating with them. It gives them the first impression of how professional you are, gives them the first impression of how much you actually care about making their dream come true, et cetera. Um, and so it's been what we started with and what we continue to focus on, because it really is that that first impression that matters the most. And then it goes into continuing to be not just their builder, be their coach, be their guide, give them that experience.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier, overcoming those objections is to, oh my gosh, building a home is like the biggest nightmare I've had of my life. And, those sentiments you get
Yeah.
back from clients. Instead, it's like you get that response. And I love to hear this from our builders of, wow, this process just completely squashed every single nightmare story I've heard. They've been great to deal with. You've been great. You've built this dream home, because that's what our builders want at the end of the day, right? That's why they got into this business.
Right.
Want to build people's dream homes. They want to
Yeah.
have a beautiful product that they put out at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I'm interested in kind of want to pivot into because we've kind of assessed where the market is, right? I want to look at future state.
Right.
And, specifically from the technology end, we have just launched a few AI-powered tools within estimating to kind of further efficiencies in the takeoff, the estimating, the quoting process. But I'm curious from your end. We do know that there are from some of your studies, from some of your studies, that there are people who are embracing generative AI
Yeah.
within the form of Chat GPT to help it with certain administrative processes, but not getting the results that they want.
Yeah.
It's how we knew that there was demand for this.
Yeah.
So I'm interested what you're seeing
Yeah.
from your research, where it comes to what's the next evolution of adoption within construction management and construction management software, which is automating processes, using tools like Buildxact to help with some of the several hats that these builders wear.
Yeah.
Um, they're not always estimators, nor should they be. They're not even always business owners. They're just kind of getting their feet wet and understanding how to run a business. They're builders. So I'm interested to kind of go into that side in future state and what you're seeing um, within the development of builders wanting to get help and have things do it for them in these areas that they're not necessarily the subject matter experts.
Yeah. I think they're finding more and more that they need it, right? And they're looking to folks like Buildxact, the manufacturer community, the supplier community, to be their partners in crime along every step of the way. And from my understanding, some of the features that you all have released with AI and the capabilities, it's also helping them close some maybe knowledge gaps or estimating gaps as well. Oh, you didn't think about this code, right? I mean, aren't there some elements too that they're
Oh, 100%.
kind of dummy proofing some of this stuff now for them, right?
Yeah, so we've launched with the help of our always on AI digital assistant Blue, which lives in our platform. Blue does several things, but one in particular is that estimate reviewer you're talking about, because
Super
that
cool.
was some feedback we got a lot from our customers was, hey, I don't know what I don't know, right? And I've been doing a lot of this specific type of extension, but now I'm moving into building single family homes. And so there's a lot that I just don't know about this space. Well, now they can leverage thousands of similar build data from thousands of similar builds to kind of just go and double check their quote for them in a matter of seconds, which is we have a 400% adoption rate since we launched this thing 2 weeks ago. So I think it's safe to say that this is something that, our builders told us they needed. We found the solution and now it's being used heavily. And it's those types of things that when you go and you talk to a builder and, you just feel for them, how overwhelmed they are. That you really
Yeah.
do, how overwhelmed they are with all of the different intricacies and stakeholders that go into one project. That it's great to hear their feedback around, oh, I didn't even think about, putting in time for rain delays. I didn't even think about, all of the regulations inspections that I needed to include within this quote, et cetera. It's great to see just those aha moments come out of like, okay, now I'm more confident sending this quote that it has everything and there's going to be less surprises.
And that's just
for
it.
the client. It
That's just
helps
it.
me
Right.
improve my client relations. And I'm confident that what I'm sending it's never going to be 100% right, but it's about 92% accuracy that it's going to have every single thing that I need in here to make sure that the customer knows what they're getting. I can choose what they see detail wise, I being the builder. Um, and it's really all about at the end of the day, just making it easier for that builder to handle the back end of building and get back on the job side.
And it goes back though too to that being, being able to provide that confidence to the homeowner, right? Or that would be home buyer. If you can walk into a conversation and say, hey, listen, 92% of the stuff is accounted for. So there aren't going to be these big surprises. We don't have to, include this plus minus 20% on the budget. So, I mean, again, these are all things I think build to a more positive experience and build confidence for that buyer to be able to sign on the dotted line. We talk to so many pros on a regular basis, and we hear the amount of calories they're burning just getting someone to commit. There's discussion after consultation. We'll look at design ideas. We look at design ideas. Will you just sign on the dotted line so we can get this thing started? And so again, I think the more transparency you can give them, the more confidence you can give them that, yep, we've got all this covered. I think the better. And that's where we see technology really being a tool. It is not the end all be all, but it's this tool of efficiency. It's this tool of pricing. So when we look at the top two biggest challenges that pros have, they've been telling us now for the past year plus that it's material prices and material availability in that order. And so if I know that I can go walk into a bid, or if I know that I can put together a takeoff that's generated like that with the most current pricing, I'm also confident as a builder that when I'm going to, do the project that I can stand behind the pricing. I'm going to hit my margins and. So, we're seeing more and more builders, the younger they are, the larger they are, integrate more technology into their workflows, and that's at the manufacturer level, at the supplier level, and at their back office level. They are adopting technology more and more. The more seamless we can make it, the better. So I think there's still some tools out there that they just don't talk well to each other. Or I've got 15 different tools to handle all these different components of my business. So I think the more that we can integrate those elements together into a single platform, I think
Yeah.
we start seeing successes. I think as we integrate these platforms like Buildxact, with the supply side, with the LBM community, with Home Depot, again, the more these systems start talking to each other, the greater these efficiencies and transparencies become. And
Yeah.
those builders that are seeing success are the ones that are adopting this sooner than later.
Yeah, you have one place to go to find the information you need versus going to three or four places, three or four times, double, triple handling sometimes to get one price on one item
Yeah.
and thousands of material and recipe or assemblies. Like
Yeah.
you just think about the sheer amount of time that it takes. I am the child of a construction business owner who still very much likes to do his math, pen and paper and calculator.
Sure. Back of a napkin. Yep.
And oh, the amount of times we have discussions around, oh my gosh, you can just have so much more time back. Anyway, well, I digress from that because I think you brought up a really good point, and that with material costs, there's all of these things happening right now that make the financial burden on builders seem more prevalent and top of mind. So I want to kind of talk about and switch to one thing that we're seeing from builders looking at their profits, their margin, things that are going on in the economy that are causing financial impacts, like with materials, et cetera. We are seeing our builders are talking to us about focusing more on their margin protection than sheer volume, right?
Yeah.
So from your perspective in your research, what are you seeing and that top performing builders are doing successfully, or what are you seeing the sentiment is?
Yeah, I think they've just got a real fine eye on truly how to run their business, right? And so when we think about materials and labor, those elements that we know we have increasing costs against, there are operational. You've got to then look at the operational side of things on maybe where you can get some cost savings to ensure your margins hold, right? You're looking at maybe breadth of product. We see in our research in some categories we're still seeing 30% of pros trying a new brand, supplier, or product on an annual basis. And when they do, they're seeing satisfaction levels of 90% plus of that new product being as good or better than what they were using prior. So this idea of looking at alternatives that may be a more affordable option, a faster option. They're looking at products that are quicker, easier to install. So I need one laborer instead of two for that underlayment. So I think operationally, you're seeing successful businesses find ways that they can offset their labor cost increases and the material increases to still keep their margins solid. You're seeing shrinking of square footage on floor plans as well. So, that's well documented. You're seeing shrinkage on lot sizes as well. That's documented, looking at, C and D lots. So I think those games are already being played, but I think there's some subtle nuances within some of the material and labor decisions that are also helping businesses remain profitable despite some of the increasing costs and challenges. But it's definitely there. The regulatory piece as well, and so I think that's where Buildxact continues to help is the regulations are not only changing and it's hard to just keep up with them, but they're becoming costly, right? And so helping me understand what's changed in my area as we think about some of the HVAC changes we've got coming on board. There's some high cost to that, and there's also some availability challenges to that. So, who's got the inventory? What are the price points of it? And what are the code requirements in my area? If I'm up to speed on that stuff, I'm not having to spend 5 hours backtracking some mistakes that I've got in my planning because we just weren't current. So I think there's a lot of operational execution and a lot of operational expenses that can be identified to help maintain some of these margins with increasing costs.
Very interesting. Um, so I do want to touch a bit on what we're seeing here with business management and operations. It doesn't look like that's too much change. This seems relatively stable. So curious around what particular areas this dives into, because business management operations is a broad category, right?
Yeah, really good. Yeah,
So specifically, what are the types of questions that you're asking in these research around operational efficiencies, around, scalability within these businesses?
yeah,
I want to just take a closer look, mostly from the financial side, around, what is this industry as a whole seeing in growth, as
sure.
kind of the other side of the coin? How do we see small businesses growing? We've talked about those particularly that you're seeing that are having better success than others. With keeping in mind here, the builder that's attending this conference, that's really just like, okay, well, I'm doing about 2 or 3 jobs a year. I really want to get to the point where I'm doubling my revenue. I'm taking on more projects, but I just don't know how to scale. I
Yeah.
don't know where to unlock, as you said, those efficiencies in those other areas.
Yeah, I think when we look at those business challenges, the top things, I'm just looking through some of the data right now. So those that are having those business challenges, the top three things are cash flow management, just managing their suppliers, and technology management. Next on the list would be managing inventory and just paying staff and getting paid from their clients. So this idea of cash flow management of trying to pay for the project they have going on, but getting homeowners to pay me to offset that. Managing suppliers is a big one. So I mentioned earlier, we in some categories have seen uh, um, 30% of pros trying a new brand or product for the first time in a given year. And we're seeing similar shifts on suppliers. We've got, and this really started with the pandemic, we've got more openness for pros and builders to try a supplier than ever before. And a lot of that is coming from necessity. It was born
Right.
out of availability, and now it's being born out of pricing considerations and price options. So, how do I manage now what used to be maybe two suppliers or three suppliers? If it's now four or five, my gosh, how am I connecting into their systems to see what they've got as far as availability? And then the third piece was that technology integration, keeping up to speed with technology. It's not inherent, as you mentioned, to a lot of these folks that you've got a family business and old habits die hard. And it's like most other things in our lives. We want things to be easy, simple, 2 clicks. I don't need to read, a 90-page manual to be able to figure out one task of the technology. So I think we're still wrestling with those when it comes to some of the operational challenges that were expressed in our surveys.
Yeah, and I want to specifically concentrate on one of those three pieces that you just talked about, and that's the supplier side, right? Um, Suppliers come in all shapes and sizes, much like building companies do. And up until at least what we were seeing in most reports up until the end of last year, it was two, three suppliers on average per build is what we would see our builders doing. That's almost, I wouldn't want to say doubled because it's actually gone about one or two on average is what we're seeing the trend go to. But, I want to speak to the necessity that that has caused for what really has been an issue between builders and suppliers for a long time on small and medium business builders specifically. You have these large production builders that can order in mass quantities, whereas that's definitely not the case for this segment of builders and their companies. So, it's why we partnered with the Home Depot over a year and a half ago. It's why we're looking at specifically those key areas of getting your quantities correct with the right products, being able to push that quote and get that price locked in, which is even more important now with all of the price fluctuation that's happening in the material market. Being able to easily order and fulfill and procure those materials. Those are really the three core areas and kind of bottleneck struggle points that we
Yep.
hear from our builders,
Yeah.
which is why I won't dive too deeply into the integration that we have with Home Depot. It is very exciting, but Home Depot is a massive company. It's not something that we can replicate with, these, smaller, more mom and pop dealers and suppliers that a lot of these, rural builders are going to for, their lumber, for, the common items that they do for their repeat builds. So I'm curious what you're seeing on the expansion of, you called back to the brands and products being out of necessity because they're having to diversify. They might have a specific appliance line that they love to include in their builds that goes into their customers' selections, but it's not as available anymore due to several reasons. So that's the necessity is like, okay, we're going to have to diversify and start looking at other brands and products that we trust and we put our recommendation behind. Because at the end of the day, it still has to be a product that they can stand behind 100%. But my question around the supplier side is, what are you seeing as far as the need? Is it what's in stock, what's in quantity, and that's why they're having to go to several different suppliers? What are you hearing from the people that you're speaking to around why they are needing to diversify
Sure.
their supplier base?
The top two reasons are still around pricing and availability. So if I'm changing a brand, if I'm changing product, if I'm changing a supplier, it's typically driven by one of those two things. But there is this other big theme that we continue to hear from the pro community, and that is that level of support and service, right? And I may choose one supplier over another because of that level of service and support that I need. Maybe I choose a supplier, I don't really need that level of support and service, but they're great in these other areas. And so I think that support service level really becomes heightened when we're challenged on our resources, right? When I have little time available, when I'm trying to just keep pace with the projects that I have, I need resolution quickly. If I have a question, if I have an issue, I need things taken care of. If you say it's going to be delivered on Tuesday, it should be delivered on Tuesday. If it's not, you need to let me know ASAP. So I think again on the supplier side, there's this opportunity to win with service and support. Now, the important part is defining what service and support means, to whom, when. But I think that's going to continue to be important as we think about the next, call it 5 to 7 years, where we believe there's some real good growth opportunity for our industry. Those suppliers, those systems that can leverage some level of support to help make the builder's life easier, more efficient, they're going to continue to win. And I think that is proven with your partnership with Home Depot. Again, you're trying to bring systems together to create those efficiencies, to create transparencies. That level of support is going to be a requirement for successful builders going forward.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny because as you're saying that, I had a aha moment of my own, even though, we discuss this often internally. It's that communication, it's that relationship, and how do you simplify that relationship, and how do you, it has as many nuances. There are as many nuances between the homeowner and the builder as there are between the builder and the supplier, right? As
Yeah.
far as, hey, I need this many materials by this time, ready to pick up or ready to be delivered to site. Oh, but it's on back order until this time. Okay, so how do I know that I need to change my schedule to
Mhm.
accommodate and not delay the build?
Right.
Is, one of those other nuances that a builder has to deal with. And so whenever you can have technology that does that for you, that sounds really overwhelming for a
Yeah.
builder.
Yeah.
Like, well, how do I trust that it's going to pick up all of these things that, I'm spending hours chasing down, and how is it improving that relationship with that supplier? And so it really is, at the end of the day, those steps that I was talking about, that tying the communication between those bottlenecks of, okay, how many of this material do I need exactly?
Mhm.
When do I need it to be on site to install? And how can I guarantee to my homeowner that the price I quoted them is not
Yeah.
extremely above what I quoted them?
Yep.
And that's what I love about, our supplier connection side, and where it's evolved to is it helps address those three core areas that just we hear from our builders of the
Critical.
time.
They're
Just,
critical. Yep.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, and a sidebar on the supplier side of things, we've got a wonderful colleague called Craig Webb. For anyone that's interested, check out Web Analytics. Craig tracks all of the mergers and acquisitions that are happening in the lumber building materials space, and I can tell you, Marissa, that the consolidation isn't slowing down. We're seeing a lot of those independents, kind of rolling up under larger umbrellas so they can consolidate some resources on the technology front, right? So as you think about the investment it takes for a supplier to get involved and integrated in some of these technologies, to have that level of transparency of pricing, of availability and inventory levels, et cetera, there's a CapEx investment that these folks have to
100%. Yeah.
spend, and it's not small. And so you're seeing a lot of these independents kind of being acquired for that reason. So as a builder on this call, be paying attention to that, because your suppliers are starting to invest in these technologies because they understand the relevance and importance of it for efficiencies, for support, et cetera. So just be on the lookout as the years keep moving forward. We anticipate a lot of acquisitions to continue to happen amongst some of those independent suppliers.
Absolutely. I mean, I could talk to you all day, Grant. Just pick your brain on several things, but unfortunately, we are coming to the end of our time. So I wanted to go ahead and pull up, I think you have it, Grant, for anybody on this call that's wanting to learn a bit more about the efficiencies and time saving features that we have around everything estimating, job management, et cetera. On the left-hand side, you can visit Buildxact. If you want to dive a bit deeper into the great and in-depth research that Grant and his company does, this is his latest quarterly report that you can link to here on the right-hand side. While you're on that site, go ahead and take a deep dive. There's such an abundance of information, and just beautiful wealth of information that really can help you grow your business and scale, and also just make you feel not alone in
That's right.
the
That's right.
struggles that
Misery
you
loves
face day to
company, right?
day.
That's right.
It's important that we don't feel alone. So thanks, Grant. As always, wonderful insights, and we will be in touch. And thanks everyone for attending who jumped on today. Um, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Grant.
Marissa, we'll see you.
Have a good one. Bye.
Take care.
You too.